That's right, folks. Another episode of the Razzball Fantasy Football Podcast. I am your host, Bobby LaMarco. Today, we've finished up all the NFL players with most of the game, and today we're going to be focused on a mock draft. That's right, folks. We got some mock drafts over on Razzball.com right now, and I'm bringing out one of our writers to talk about his latest mock draft that you can find the link in the description and over on Razzball.com. Before we do, I want to make sure you follow us across the board at Razzball Fantasy on YouTube, IG, and TikTok. And of course, make sure you jump over to Razzball.com. We have the greatest analysis for every fantasy football sport you can think of: baseball, basketball, hockey, and more. So jump over to Razzball.com and check it out right now. But today's show, the Bryce is Right, the first NFL mock draft, starting right now. All right, folks. Ben Wasley. Did I nail it?
You got it.
Wasley. I love it. I love every second of this. Ben Wasley, one of our new writers, decided to take it upon himself to do a mock draft. And you can go check that over at Razzball.com. Now, Ben, I'm excited to talk to you today. What's going on, man? It's football draft season. You excited or what?
Man, I'm so keen. Just a week away. I've been spending so much time looking into stuff for this mock draft. 2 years ago, I came top 5 in mock draft accuracy rankings. Last year, I got dominated. I came in so confident. I was like, going for the number 1 spot, and I finished like way outside the top 100. I was like, this is not going well. So this year, I'm back, and I'm going to absolutely nail it.
All I'm going to tell you is you probably sway for the fences. That's what we do at Razzball. That's why Ben's a good fit with us. You're like, you know what? I'm going for number 1. And you know what? You struck out. But you know what? You went for 1. And that's why we love you. You probably took some bold takes. And we got more bold takes today. Now, if you go over to Razzball.com, you dropped your first 1.0 mock draft on Razzball last Friday. However, today, we actually have some updates, what I'm excited to break down with you right now. Let's dive right into this. And first one is some movement with the top quarterbacks. Now, if you go check out Ben's article on Razzball from last week, these are going to be slightly different. Some of the 2 biggest key differences for the quarterbacks, per se, is that you flipped C.J. Stroud and Bryce Young. Why did you do that this week? What have you heard so far for the NFL draft?
There's been a lot of buzz around the industry that Bryce Young's cancelled all of his remaining interviews. There's a lot of talk that he believes he's going 1 to the Panthers. The bookies have switched things around. They had Bryce Young way out at like 5-1 to go to the Panthers originally, and suddenly he's the hot favorite. You couldn't back him. It would be crazy. He's like minus 1,000 to go to the Panthers. It's basically considered a done deal. The general idea is that the owner, Axe Tepper, he apparently just really prefers Bryce Young, and even though all the coaches like CJ Stroud better, ultimately it's the owner's choice, and so it seems like Young's going to go to Carolina.
Wow. That's tough to swallow for Frank Wright and company. You don't want the owner meddling too much. This is a huge decision, especially what they gave up for this pick. But Frank Wright does have experience with rookies. He did it with Carson Wentz in 2016. Was he in Philly? So he does have some experience with rookie quarterbacks. The other biggest headline that you've changed is that you have Anthony Richardson slipping. You originally had him in the top 4. Now you have him going at 11 to the Tennessee Titans. Tell us why you have him slipping to 11.
This is a tough one. I originally had someone trading up with the Cardinals, and it looked like that was going to be the case for a while. Initially, I had the Raiders trading up, and we also talked about the Titans possibly trading up. It's seeming less likely that's going to happen. There's a lot of talk that the Cardinals are going to stick and pick Tyree Wilson or even Will Anderson. And it's even possible that CJ Stroud slides as well. It would be crazy, but there's talk that the Texans might not even take a quarterback at 2. So we could even see Richardson slipping even further as Stroud's available for the Titans. I think there's a lot of risk with Richardson. He's very, very, very raw. He's going to take at least a year, maybe 2 to develop. And I just don't think teams are willing to give up a lot of draft capital for a player that's not a guarantee. So I think we might see these quarterbacks slide a little bit more than we expected. It's possible that Richardson even slides down towards the bottom of the top 20.
That's kind of what we saw last year, right? So I wouldn't be that surprised if it happens again, especially with these raw prospects like Will Levis, Anthony Richardson, that aren't necessarily year 1 starters. You're going to see teams that might want to be more established with their team around them. So wouldn't be surprised there. Let's jump down to the most exciting position for fantasy football. That's the running back position. And let's talk a little bit about where you got Bijan Robinson landing now. Now, in your original mock, you had him going to Philadelphia, striking through the hearts of every Kenny Gainwell and Rashad Penny Fit Dynasty owner. But now you have him going to Detroit, which is, I mean, do you hate us? Like, I mean, David Montgomery, DeAndre Swift, Bijan Robinson, what are we doing? So tell us, why do you think Detroit's going to take the shot on this kid?
Look, it sounds absolutely insane. I've seen a lot of very smart people mocking this. I've even seen him going to Detroit at 6 in some pretty hot mocks. So it's just one of those weird situations where you think it's crazy and you think it doesn't make any sense, but there's a lot of talk that they're totally over DeAndre Swift and they want to bring Robinson in to essentially replace him, and that Montgomery's really just there as a Jamal Williams big banger type. It's very possible he goes to Atlanta. It's very possible he goes to Philly, but I've got Jalen Carter slipping to 10, and I think Philly would rather take Carter over Robinson. He's just a high. They're both elite prospects, but Carter just really helps their D-line, which they tend to prefer. They nearly always go D-line or O-line in the first round, which means Robinson would slip to Detroit, and that's going to kill his fantasy value. It's going to kill Montgomery. It's going to kill Swift. So, look, this would not be ideal, and even the bookies have it at about 8-1, but no one really knows where this guy's going. I just think this is probably the most likely option, even though it's still kind of unlikely.
All right, so other than Robinson, is there any other running backs that you have a shot at going in the first round? Any other notable guys you want to bring up? Any landing spots for that running back?
I really like Jahmyr Gibbs, I think Buffalo's probably the most likely spot he could land. He kind of fits into that Devin Singletary role. I just don't think they're really sold on James Cook. I wasn't sold on James Cook last year. I just don't think he's that good. He's fine, but I think he's closer to being backup quality, and Damian Harris is just their big goal line banger. I think they'd like someone explosive. Jahmyr Gibbs is kind of like that Tony Pollard style, very explosive, very talented, elite runner. I think he could easily go in the first round, but he's probably more likely to go in that like Jonathan Taylor area of like early second rounds.
Okay, gotcha. Let's jump down to the wide receivers. In your mock, you had 4 guys going in the first round, but now you have the same 4, but they're moving around a little bit. So one of the things that stood out was that you had Johnston, who dropped down multiple spots, falling all the way, I believe, to the Giants at 25. So why are you dropping him? I think you had him at 15 originally to the Packers, and now you have him dropping 10 spots. So what have you heard?
Look, Quentin Johnston's my favorite prospect there, but he's very risky. He's got separation issues. He's not quite as good a route runner as some of the others. He just isn't an NFL guarantee. He's very fast. He's very big. He's explosive. He's got like wooden hands, so that's a bit of an issue as well in the NFL. But he's really good after the catch. So if they can get the ball in his hands, he's going to be really useful. Plus, he can play outside, unlike some of the others. So I like him better. But a lot of sources are saying that in the NFL, they're just really worried about his ability to separate from like elite NFL level cornerbacks. And when you're picking in the first round, you want a prospect who's definitely going to be able to compete. And he's just a bit riskier. They tend to prefer Zay Flowers, who's a lot smaller, and I'm not really convinced by that. Of course, Jackson Smith and Jigba, he's been my top wide receiver pick, and he's most people's top wide receiver pick for a while. But again, he's a slot-only option, so even to Houston, that's a little bit rich. There's just no one in the draft that's like that, Jamar Chase, Drake London, Garrett Wilson quality player. It's a bit of a weaker class in general. And while these guys are the consensus top 4 to go in the first round, I think we'll see them slip into the 20s for the most part. And I think people are going to overpay a little bit from a fantasy perspective. So I'd be very cautious on these 4 in particular.
So you also have the Seahawks taking Zay Flowers now. That's one of your latest updates. So what's your thoughts by that? Is it like a Tyler Lockett replacement type thing? Or is it – okay. Go ahead. Break it down. Yeah,
it's a bit of a Tyler Lockett replacement. I think long-term they see it that way. I think he could play outside if absolutely necessary, but he is really more of a slot guy. He's not very big, but he's pretty explosive. There's been a lot of talk of people mocking them to teams like the Patriots and the Ravens because he is that smaller type of speed guy. But I think the Seahawks haven't brought in anybody at all, really, to compete with Marquise Goodwin for that wide receiver 3 spot. And they don't really have a lot going forward. I think they need to give a little bit more to support to Geno Smith now that they've signed him to a big contract. And I think Flowers probably does that. They could easily go with like a Jordan Addison as well, but I think Flowers is the prospect that most teams are starting to see as their wide receiver 2 at least.
Okay, let's jump down to the tight ends. You have 2 going in the first round. I've heard that this is a really good draft for tight ends. Both very good landing spots, Cowboys and the Bengals. Talk to us a little bit about these guys, why you think that they're fits with these teams, and are you which one are you going to prioritize in Dynasty?
This is a really interesting one. There's a lot of good tight ends in this class. I really like Darnell Washington, who's like a big blocking tight end. Sam Laporta could easily go in the first round. I originally had him going to the Bengals. I like him as well. Even Luke Musgrave is probably first-round quality. All of these players are better than Trey McBride, who was the first tight end off the board last year. It's a really strong tight end class, and even deeper down, there's a lot of good options as well. The problem is because there's so many good options, that means they're all going to fall. If you're someone like the Packers, who obviously desperately needs a tight end, you're not going in with Josiah DeGuara, that you can wait until the second round. There's going to be someone there. And if they start to come off, you can just trade up a little bit into the early second round rather than wasting a first round pick. And that's great for teams like the Cowboys and the Bengals. Michael Mayer's the favorite to go to the Cowboys, but I personally prefer Dalton Kincaid. He's an every down back. He's a stronger blocker in particular. So he's going to be out there every snap. And obviously, even when a tight end's blocking, occasionally they're going to end up running a route of some description and they're going to get more receptions that way. Mayo was a really good producer at Notre Dame, but I just don't think he's got the upside of Kincaid. Regardless, they're both going to be fantastic prospects for fantasy. I could see them both going in the first round of dynasty drafts. And they have that kind of, not quite the Kyle Pitts style upside, but they're both really good tight ends that you can slot in as possible tight end ones in the future.
Yeah, I love the landing spots, so I'm rooting for you on this one. That's definitely some good landing spots because there's a lot of targets that just got vacated by Dalton Schultz, Hayden Hurst. Even though I have a deep, I have some feelings for Irv Smith. I think I want to see him succeed in Cincy, but neither here or there. All right, let's break it down. Let's say, hypothetically speaking, you bounce back. You're the number 1 mock drafter. You hit 100% of these picks. All right? Let's get crazy here. Let's put out the juju. Let's put it out there. Let's look for the best here. Which player, currently or rookie, do you think gains the most value based on the picks you've made for this mock in round 1?
It's an interesting one because a lot of these guys are going to places that aren't really great for their short-term value, in particular the quarterbacks. If these quarterbacks go to those 4 spots, I don't think you want any of them in redraft fantasy. And even in Dynasty, it's a bit risky. We know that Carolina isn't exactly known for producing high point scoring fantasy quarterbacks. The Texans are probably the best bet. So I like CJ Stroud's landing spot. The problem is that unlike the other 4, he's just not as mobile. He's not an explosive runner. Anthony Richardson's basically like Cam Newton. He's not a great passer, but he's such an amazing athlete. But he's going to the Titans, and I don't even think they're going to play him for a season or 2. So none of those quarterbacks are in good landing spots. The wide receivers are similar issues. They're mostly going to be the wide receiver 2 or wide receiver 3 on their team for the most part. They've got other good players around them. My favorite's probably Quentin Johnston. We talked about Isaiah Hodgkins, and you were very high on him last time we chatted. And I feel like he could take that outside role and be a true wide receiver 1 at the Giants if he does go there. We know Daniel Jones is interested in passing the ball more. He's got some competition with the likes of Darren Waller, but he does profile as that true number 1 receiver. He's the guy that I'd probably be targeting out of all of them. And I think we're going to find a lot of guys going in the early second round, like your Jahmyr Gibbs types, who are actually going to have a better fantasy role than a lot of these guys that we talked about today.
Yeah, we've seen that in the past. Clyde Edwards-Helaire with Jonathan Taylor. So it's not just because the guy goes in the first does not mean that day 2 picks cannot be better fantasy football. That's all we got for today, folks. This is our first go around of the NFL mock draft. Now, Ben, tell the people when they can expect your next update. When is it coming out, and what else should they look forward to for your content the rest of season?
So obviously we had a look at my latest mock today. I finished that yesterday, so that's pretty much up to date. And if you go to ffdfantasyfootball.com, I've got commentary on every single pick explaining my thoughts. I'll continue updating it. I'll probably have my last official mock coming out on Tuesday, roughly. After that, I'll be doing little updates on Instagram in particular. You can check us out on Instagram at the Fantasy First Down. Or you can look for us on Twitter at Fantasy First Down with no O in the down, because that's too long for a Twitter handle. So Fantasy First DWN. And you can hit us up on any of those. If you have any questions or thoughts, then check us out on Instagram. We're also giving away a spot in the FFD League, which means you get to play against us. So the person who can predict the top 10 most accurately will get that spot. So check us out on Instagram and have a go at that competition if you want a free chance to play with us. So you can find us in heaps of places. And of course, I'll hopefully do one more mock on Razzball as well before the final draft, just to give my final thoughts and something for you guys to follow on along with as you watch the NFL draft.
Love it. Love every second. And thank you again, Ben, for joining us today. This is great insight. And go check out his article right now on Razzball.com. And go check out all Ben's stuff. We love him. We support him. We love every second. Once again, I'm your host, Bobby LaMarco. Make sure you follow us across the board at Razzball Fantasy on YouTube, IG, and TikTok. And, of course, make sure you jump over to Razzball.com. We have great stuff for football, basketball, baseball, and hockey. And, hey, if you have any extra time, give me a follow at Bobby LaMarco on Twitter. Thanks again, Ben. We are out of here.